Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad to be here for this Serene conference. And the aim of my presentation today is, if I can, sorry, is really to talk about online illicit markets and try and understand better what technologies offenders are going to use, why they are going to be using it, and maybe to surprise you as to how low-tech offenders are actually online. And so we hear a lot of talk about, Tor, the dark networks that operate online, but actually when you start looking at it, there's a lot of information that you can gather very easily on these offenders, and they are all not using the best tools available to them, and very often they will actually just show their face online. And so today in my conference, I want to talk a bit more about how online illicit markets operate, who is operating on them, how are they organized, and then to show you even some videos of what you can collect online. And so we're going to have some movie time at the end of this presentation, and you'll get to see some of these offenders in action. So the first part of my presentation is to talk a bit more about online illicit markets. And you may not realize it, but when you're browsing online every single day, you're actually surrounded by online illicit markets. They are pretty much everywhere. If you Google them, you will find them very easily. They will take on many forms. Of course, we've all seen, these online forums where people can go. They're going to put up ads for the products and services that they have for sale. And then their customers can reach out to the offenders and say, I'll buy one of those Visa cards you have for sale. I'll buy one of those fake identities you have for sale. Here, ping me on Skype or whatever other type of communication channel. There are also more sophisticated channels for offenders to communicate with each other, to interact and to buy and sell illicit services. You're going to have, for example, automated shops. And so automated shops are kind of like your Amazon for buying stolen identities or stolen financial information. And in this case, you can enter very specific information. So you can ask for, you can ask for an RBC credit card business with at least $5,000 of limit. And then the system will provide you with these cards. You can just check out very easily. You pay with Bitcoins, and you are done in a matter of minutes, and you have all the information that you want. So these are kind of the what we figure is an online illicit markets. This dark discussion forum. This is going to be your automated shops, but actually they're even closer than you think. Facebook is probably one of the biggest drug dealer there is in the world right now. Drug dealers openly advertise for drugs, for stolen credit cards on Facebooks. They're going to create groups, and then you can just join the group and contact them. And we've seen research with over 2,000 people just being in the same group just for buying cannabis, for example. And so Facebook is a very big player. Instagram is going to be a very big player. Snapchat, all the online social networks are actually going to be very involved in dealing with illicit products. You're going to find, of course, your chat messaging system. Telegram is one that has been called out very often. And today we'll be talking a bit more about ICQ. So I don't know if people used to use ICQ in the 90s. I'm really sad because I cannot remember my ICQ number from when I was a teenager. But it's still being used today, and that'll be kind of the main focus of the second part of my presentation today. But both Telegram and ICQ have channels or chat rooms. People can join them, can exchange with each other, send files or messages with each other. And so this is kind of what most people think about when they think about online illicit markets. And then they start hearing about this dark net, this dark web. And people will say, well, there's many types of different dark web, many types of different dark nets. They'll throw in, for example, I2P. I challenge anyone in this room to use I2P to buy anything illicitly. It's almost impossible to use. So when we talk about dark net and dark web, what we're mostly talking about is the Tor network. And so the Tor network very quickly was created by the U.S. Marine. They wanted to create a channel for their members to communicate anonymously and securely. And they figured that, if only the U.S. Marine or the U.S. Navy is using this channel, it's going to be very easy to find these individuals all over the world. So they said, well, we're going to open this to the whole world, and we're going to kind of hide our traffic between everyone else's traffic. Kind of smart and a nice thing to do for all of us. And so on this Tor network, what you're going to find is actually even more online illicit markets. Here you have a picture of Silk Road, which was kind of the first big market on the Tor network. And Silk Road really was a game changer for online illicit markets. It attracted a lot of attention from U.S. politicians who called it, for example, more brazen than anything else by light years. And the reason for this was because the administrators of this online illicit market was really taunting the US government, telling them, I am above the law, I am dealing drugs online, and you will never catch me, I will always be free. And 2.5 years later, unfortunately for him, well, he was arrested, and now he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison with no parole. And so what really changed with these markets and the advent of the Tor network? Well, first of all, these markets started using massively cryptocurrencies. So here you have, for example, Bitcoin, but they're using more and more Monero and other types of cryptocurrencies who are even more anonymous. And this allows you to buy and sell goods or services online anonymously, instantaneously, and making sure that all the payments are going to go through all the time. And so this was really a big game changer for markets. They also introduced the use of escrow services. So basically, when you're buying something online from an offender, I'm not going to teach you anything when I tell you that offenders are unreliable. And in many cases, you would pay the offender but never get what you paid for. And to circumvent this problem, they put in the escrow payment, where you would pay a trusted third party who would hold on to the payment until you receive the good or service, and then you could release the payment. And so this really enhanced the security and the ease of transactions for individuals. They also use PGP encryption so that even if law enforcement managed to look at the servers, look at computers, they couldn't get the communications. And of course, as I said, the Tor network, which is going to allow you to surf anonymously online and also to host content without it being able to be traced most of the time. And so there's a big question about, how big have these markets become? For us, we looked at just the darknet part of it, so just these markets hosted on the Tor network. And what we've seen is a big increase in their size over time. A couple of years back when I first started studying them, it was only $90 million USD of sales that they were making every year. And in the last year, what we managed to capture or to see is over $550 million USD dollars in sales on these online illicit markets. So they have grown quite quickly, very rapidly. And what do they deal in? Well, they mostly deal in drugs. And this is kind of their main activity. We see some financial fraud. We see some fake papers being sold. We see a lot of malware being sold. But for the most part, these markets are all going to be about drugs. And here you have, for example, the distribution of revenues for the Canadians who are involved in these online Tor markets. And what you see is that, as I just said before, most of their revenues are generated from dealing drugs. So cannabis is actually pretty big. And ever since it's legal in Canada to buy and sell cannabis, we haven't seen a decrease. Actually, we've seen an increase in the number of sales of cannabis. But we also see prescription drugs, stimulants being very popular, and we see kind of a small portion of the revenues being driven to fraud-related items. And of course, you may think that you're going to make a lot of money if you start dealing on these markets. Well, not necessarily. Here you have the distribution. I just took one sample, and these are for carders, so financial fraudsters, people who buy and sell credit cards online. And in this case, the people who operate on these Tor network markets, half of them are making under $10,000. And when I put in $10,000, I was trying to be generous. It's actually under $500 for most of these people. And so you do have some people who make a lot of money, but in most cases, it's actually a very difficult business to be in, and they're not going to be generating massive amounts of revenues being involved in this trade. And so you have markets on the internet, you have markets on the Tor network, and one of the really interesting patterns that we've seen is that these markets will tend to concentrate around geographical areas. And so what we'll see is offenders who operate, for example, in France are going to be hanging out in the same forums, in the same markets. People from Canada are going to be doing the same. You will have these transnational or international platforms, but in many cases, what you will need to find is actually to find the platforms for the region where you want to operate, that you want to investigate. And this is a good example. I mean, in the data that we collect, we couldn't find anything about French banks, and we were looking and investigating them, and it was really surprising. And so we thought, are these French banks just so amazing that no one's in the world managed to hack them? Well, no, it's just that the people who hack French banks are going to hang out in specific forums, and this is one of them, the dark French anti-system. And if you go there, you're going to find plenty of exploit and plenty of people who have hacked French banks. But if you go in the international domain or even the American markets, you'll find that people don't know who BNP Paribas is or who Société Générale is. Now, why would people move to the dark web, the dark net, when they're dealing in online illicit markets? I mean, the first clue or the first answer we could bring to this is to say, well, maybe it's because on the Tor network you can actually host websites without them being able to be taken down. Well, if we look at the internet, I'm sure everyone here has heard of the Pirate Bay. I mean, Pirate Bay was first taken down, 10 years ago? And it's still online today if you Google for it. And so even when you go on the internet, you think, well, the Tor network will allow me to host a website forever and without interference from law enforcement. That's actually not the case, because you can do exactly the same thing on the internet. Yes, you will have to move your infrastructure pretty much every single day, but other than being a hassle, you can still host whatever you want on the internet. You don't really need the Tor network or the dark web for that. The other thing is that, the Tor network is a tool that is really far from perfect. I told you about, the Silk Road story, how the administrator of Silk Road was arrested. He's going to spend the rest of his days in prison. But we've seen, Tor being manipulated, being hacked, and users being traced back actually while they were using Tor. And so it is possible. It will require a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of resources. But Tor is not a perfect tool that will protect your anonymity at all costs. Even more puzzling is that actually police can have an impact on the people who operate on dark markets. And here you have the results. I know it's maybe not that clear, but what you should see is two lines, and one going down and the one going up. Well, the line going up was actually the trend of cannabis dealers in Canada. And so we were estimating kind of what was the share of Canadian dealers selling cannabis online. And what we realized was that after a police operation that the RCMP did a couple of years back, well, what we saw is the share decreased vastly, and it divided by 5 about the share of cannabis dealings online on the dark web by Canadian, just because the RCMP launched an operation on it. And so why would people use the dark web? Why would people use the Tor network? Well, when you're hosting a platform, it's pretty much, I wouldn't say useless, but it's not like a cure for all of your problems. But the Tor network is really something that will help you keep anonymous, and it's mostly useful for who? For the participants. So when you buy and sell something online, when you go through the Tor network, it just adds a layer of complexity that makes it more difficult for law enforcement to locate you, to find where you are and who you are. And so it's mostly useful for the people who are participating, but when you're looking at the ecosystem and infrastructure, it's not really a game changer. And just to give you an example, we were researching kind of more of the Canadian markets, and especially for financial fraud. And about a year ago, we were really happy in apostrophes, to see that actually Canada just got its own online illicit markets on the dark web. And so it was called the Canadian Headquarters, and it was really made by Canadians and for Canadians. And so what you would find on this is a lot of actors. If some people here have done investigations of Canadian financial fraud, Frank Costello is a well-known actor that's been around for a number of years. And what you're going to find in this market is these actors dealing in mainly Canadian financial institutions, stolen data from Canada. And we were talking with these vendors. That's one of the things I do pretty much every day. I just go online and talk with these guys just to find out what they're doing. And many of them were actually saying, yeah, we're on the dark web, we're on this platform, it's really nice. But actually all the action, or much of the action, is happening where? On ICQ. And so I was really surprised, because I hadn't heard of ICQ in like 20 years. But they told me, no, you really should go over there and try and see what's going on. And this is what we did, and this is an example of what you're going to find. And it's really interesting to see that ICQ actually keeps logs of everything that's happening in there. So to the right, you can see all the pictures. And on ICQ, you can share pictures, and you can even share files. And so just a funny story, someone was selling a phishing kit, actually was giving out a phishing kit, telling people, if you want to steal people's password, here's a kit, you just install it on a server, you run it, and you're going to be able to steal everyone's passwords with it. And this is my gift to the community. And so we went through the source code, and very, well, not surprisingly, we found, these functions over here where they're called mail. What they basically do is email the offender the information that you just stole. But you may see that there's two functions for mail. And so the guy who was giving out this phishing kit to the community, telling everyone I'm such a nice guy, was actually also emailing himself a copy of all the data that people were stealing with his kit. And here we kind of hid his name, but you can actually get his Gmail address if you wanted to. And so on ICQ, you're going to see people are not going to be really careful. They're going to give out their Gmail address. They're actually going to give out just screenshots of the accounts that they've hacked. So, if you're Scotiabank, you're kind of happy to see that, you have an account, you have all the numbers and the information to flag this account. The people are going to show you even their kids. So if you want to know, if they have family or anything, and you have all the data that they've stolen, you're going to find many correlates of financial fraud as well. So in this network, it's mostly about financial fraud. And one of the things that they do is they'll do travel fraud. So they'll use their stolen credit cards to buy plane tickets. And you can only get the plane tickets for today or tomorrow because they figure out that you're not going to check your credit card record, see that someone bought an Air Canada ticket, and then you're able to fly with these stolen credit cards. And of course, you're going to find fake IDs. So you're going to find all these stuff on ICQ, and that's kind of interesting. And you figure, well, okay, so can you gather information, intelligence on these networks? Well, I just give you a glimpse into what you can do. But of course, they're going to show even more of themselves. So of course, if you're an offender, you need to be in a fancy car going really fast in the streets and be putting that online. You need to be counting your money online as well. Of course, that's what all good offenders do. But you're also going to be, these guys are going to be doing infomercials. So they'll be going on ICQ, publishing videos with their real face and just telling everyone, I have the best cards stolen available in Canada. You should call me. I have the best prices. And then you have his kid who's jumping in the back of the car as well. And you're going to have people who are going to be recruiting members. So very often you will need mules to do some carding. And so you're going to see people who are actually just advertising and telling people it's very easy for you to participate in our organization. We'll send you money. You keep a little bit. You send us the rest. You'll see. So lots of advertisement. You're going to see, fake IDs. So they're going to show you kind of the level of detail of the fake cards that they're doing, and then you get, the face of either it's the guy or one of their customers. So you're going to have this is the first time that I saw the new healthcare card from Quebec. I hadn't seen it before. It's like, oh, nice, we have a new healthcare card. They're going to show you how they're hacking stuff, so how they're getting into PayPal, how they're going into, bank accounts. And this is all on ICQ because, they don't have an online profile. They need to prove to you that they really can get into the accounts. And so they will film themselves while hacking these accounts. And so I'm going to miss out on some of these videos. I'm really sorry about this, but time is running out. But they're going to have, these skimmers to copy your credit card with Bluetooth. And they're even going to have these little dongles that, they claim can copy the dongle that you use to open the doors to your car. And with this dongle, you're supposed to be open car doors. And so basically, just to wrap up, I think that's what's really interesting to remember from this talk is, first of all, online illicit markets are pretty much everywhere. We may think that they're all on the dark web and the internet, but actually they're on Facebook, they're on social media, they're pretty much everywhere on the internet and the dark web. And when you're trying to understand what is going on to these markets, you have to understand exactly which offenders you're looking for. And if you're looking for Canadians, well, they're going to be in the Canadian ICQ rooms or Canadian headquarters. And this makes it actually much easier for us when we're doing investigations because we can actually target the people we want very easily. And what we're going to find is that even though there's a lot of tools available, the dark web, encryption, PGP, and everything, these guys are still, on ICQ with their face, presenting all the data that they've hacked, all the accounts that they've hacked. And so they're actually being very open about it. And there's a very easy answer to why. It's because when you want to sell something, well, there's very little trust between offenders, and they need to go above and beyond to show that they are trustworthy and that you can buy stuff from them and that they will deliver. And so this requirement forces them to be open and public about what they do, and this is something that we can bank on if we're doing investigations. So that's it for me. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer questions later on. Thank you.